Welcome! Today we are going to examine a very strange topic with you. I think I once read something in Stephen Hawking's book. I heard something like, God does not create a stone he cannot lift. What do you think about this?
Yes, exactly. There is something like that. In his book, A Brief History of Time, Stephen Hawking tries to answer this philosophical question. Can the Creator create a stone that even he cannot lift? Although Hawking tries to find an answer to this question, the answer he gives still remains within the framework of the relationship between the whole and the part, within the concept of divinity. The mystical understanding answers the same question like this. Did the Creator create a stone separate from himself so that he cannot lift it? This is not a sign of powerlessness, but an expression of maturity. That question Hawking asked and the mystical answer to it actually show us this. There is no division between the whole and the part the way we imagine. Now, let's clarify this further with the hologram example, because this example will explain something very important to us, that a human being is not actually a small part outside of, separate from the universe. On the contrary, that they are the vast universe itself, existing only within a limited appearance. Think of a hologram card. For example, that shimmering little sticker on an ID card or a bank card, whose image changes as you change the angle. Even if it is only one small piece, the entire sticker carries within it the complete information of the same image. If you cut the card in two, the whole image, only slightly fainter, appears again in each of the two pieces. This is exactly how a human being is too. Even though they appear to be a small part of the universe, in fact, they carry within themselves the entirety of the whole, only in a more limited, fainter form.
I don't believe it. So the image isn't hidden in one particular corner of the card?
Yes, exactly. The image is not hidden at one particular point, one particular corner of the card. The whole image is everywhere, present at every point at the same time. In the same way, the universe is not in a single place, a single center either. It is fully present at every point in every being at the same time. That is why, in a holographic structure, you cannot point to a place and say, this is the center of the image, this is the starting point, because there is no such center, no such point of origin. If there were, then there would also have to be a boundary, that is, a line where we could say, up to here is this image, beyond here is the other image. But it is not possible to draw such a boundary in a hologram. There is a consequence to this. Since there is no boundary, we cannot draw a line between the human being and the universe either, saying the human ends here, the universe begins here. Just as it is not possible to add one image onto another image, or to subtract something from an image, we cannot extract the human being either as a part separate from the universe. Now, let's ask this. Then how do we perceive ourselves as a separate, independent being, a small part apart from the universe? The answer is this. This perception of separateness actually exists only in our perception. In reality, a human being is not a part disconnected, separate from the universe. They are the limited appearance of the whole. They are the whole itself.
So you're saying there isn't a creator-created duality either?
Yes, exactly. So there is neither a creator nor a created duality. Because the concept of creation means bringing forth something separate from something else and then ruling over that thing with a magic wand or a remote control, so to speak, just like a god and the beings that God created and the relationship between them. But when we take the holographic principle into account, the concept of creation is not in question at all. It is replaced by the concept of being assumed to exist. This concept tells us that something which does not actually exist appears as if it exists. Therefore, that which appears to exist, that which is assumed to exist, loses its existence within the thing that gives it that apparent existence. If we take this one step further, in the absolute sense, even the thing we think of as the plate itself has no real existence. If we think about the relationship between the world of images and the world of interference patterns that is the source of this world, we can say this. When we go beneath the material dimension we perceive, we encounter in order the molecular, atomic, nucleon, electromagnetic, and cosmic ray dimensions. But the matter is not limited to this, because when we go beneath this dimension as well, there is yet another dimension that is the source of all of these, and we call this the radiational, fire, nar dimension. The dimension in which our spirit, formed on the 120th day, exists, along with the radiational beings expressed by the name Jinn, is also this dimension. In this dimension, there is no such thing as going from one point to another point, or coming from one point to another. Concepts like going and coming are related to the reflections of the images on the plate. That is why, even when evaluating the plate itself, the outcome of these reflections is always what is taken as the basis. This, in this sense, gives rise to a hierarchy. Just as in the Barzakh experience described in mystic sources, in the radiational dimension called the hereafter, in the environments called paradise, people take their place at the same levels according to their own state of knowledge and power. In this dimension, too, martyrs, saints, prophets, and messengers are able to come together and meet according to their own knowledge and energy power. This is explained by this same hierarchy. That is why movement in the spirit dimension is a concept entirely dependent on our point of view. For the same reason, there is no such thing as distance in a meeting that takes place in the spirit dimension either. It is also for this reason that in the Barzakh transition dimension, within the experience of the grave described in mystic sources, a person perceives both paradise and hell, and the beings unique to these layers, the Zabani, as clearly as if they were right there beside them, and thus comes to understand what their outcome will be.
Really? So what exactly does this fire dimension mean?
We can also regard the fire dimension as consciousness. At the same time, consciousness is a dimension even closer to the essence than this dimension. It is a dimension whose base is the speed of light and beyond. Another name for it is the light nur dimension, that is, angel. Accordingly, we can say that the source of everything in the universe is angels. That is, everything is formed from angels and from their condensed states. That is why the thing that exists in every dimension is angels. Even though everything is in fact angel, the limitation arising from the condensation caused by the reflection leads to it perceiving itself as Jinn, or as a materially formed human being. As a result, even though the images in the hidden order are fully in effect, only the requirement of a limited existence emerges from behind a veil. This situation is expressed in a verse as follows: "There is nothing that does not, without exception, glorify him, but you do not understand their glorification." The famous Islamic Sufi Muhyiddin ibn al-Arabi says this on the subject: "There is no empty space the size of a prostration spot in space, in the sky, in the void. There is no place void of angels." A hadith also states, "The sky creaks. There is not a hand's breadth of the sky where prostration has not been made."
So whether from an outside-in or an inside-out point of view, all existence has come into being through angels, and all the changes, all the transformations we see in the material dimension are likewise brought about by these beings. Consequently, this concept expressed in the past by the name angel finds its counterpart in modern science as energy, force, power. Indeed, this is also the very meaning of the word. In this way, what is described about the system in verses and hadiths becomes even more understandable today. Let's give a few examples of this. There's this hadith about hell. On that day, hell will be brought forth. It will have 70,000 rains, and with each rain, 70,000 angels pulling hell. We can express this hadith, according to the explanation above, as follows. It is the gravitational force possessed by the sun overcoming, through the force generated by the thermonuclear reaction within the sun, this pull of gravity and swallowing everything that comes before it, thereby ending its previous state and transforming it. In the same way, galactic collisions, supernova explosions, earthquakes caused by the tearing of fault lines, and other similar disasters are likewise the formations, that is, the transformations, of these beings referred to by the name angel.
Wow. So is this related to what they call people are asleep?
If we think again about these same relationships, this concept makes more understandable to us the expressions described in the mystical realm. People are asleep, they awaken when they die before you die. The world is like the dream of one who is sleeping, as well as the fact that in the dimension beyond death, concepts such as mother, father, sibling, friend become void, and everyone takes their place at the same age.
This shows that in the dimension of images on the plate, the values belonging to the world of images are invalid in this dimension, and that life continues here with a different reality. Also, since there's no concept of time and space on this plate, if consciousness becomes aware of itself in this dimension, it can, through its astral body, instantly communicate and exchange information with the stars, planets within its own essence, and with the radiational beings in the subdimensions of these. The same holds true for the light dimension as well. The most famous example of these is again a journey of this kind made by Ibn al-Arabi. In his famous work Al-Futuhat al-Makkiyah, he recounts that in a realm he visited called Alam al-Samsama, he met and spoke with the living beings of that realm, that they too knew our world, and that this is why they asked him for news of it. In the same way, in the event of the Miraj, ascension of the Prophet Muhammad, his dimensional ascent following Jerusalem, that is, his journey in the Barzakh realm, also took place through the spirit, in other words, through the astral body.
Similarly, just as journeys are made to the twin dimensions of separate worlds, journeys can also be made to the Earth's own radiational dimensions. As many scientists today also accept, the Earth, just like living organisms, has an order, a system, with its forests, its rivers, its fault lines, and volcanoes. This view is also expressed with the word Gaia, which Professor Sir James Lovelock took from ancient Greek mythology. According to this, the Earth, being a self-regulating and living entity, is aware of everything within itself and tries to preserve its own system by reacting to every action taken. Mystics who enter into resonance with the consciousness of this being have expressed that they met with the spirit of the earth, saying things like, "It appeared to me in such and such a form, it behaved toward me in such a way, and gave me such and such information."
I don't believe it. So is our consciousness also made up of nothing but a reflection?
Yes, exactly. What must not be overlooked here is this. Even though our consciousness in fact consists of nothing but the interference patterns on the plate, because of the reflection, our mind, perceiving through the five senses within the space-time prison, brings a material body into being for itself. In the same way, in the spirit dimension too, entering into a limitation once again according to the rules of that dimension, it imagines that it has a spirit, a microwave body, of its own, and that everything consists of nothing but the spirit dimension. Even though Jinn are, in our view, at a higher level, their being bound to time brings a limitation within their own dimension, the spirit dimension, as well. In contrast, units that perceive from a reflection perspective closer to the essence can, whether in the material dimension or in the spirit dimension, thanks to the consciousness they possess, pass into subdimensions without being bound by time and space. That is, they can travel to whichever realms they wish and can form a body suited to the rules of that dimension. That is to say, a consciousness of this kind, living on a planet 50,000 light-years away from us, or in the radiational twins of stars, or even in galaxies millions or billions of light-years away from us, can suddenly materialize in our world and be seen in human form. It can live without being bound by the rules of our dimension and without being distinguished by us. In contrast, we, unaware of this difference, are mistaken in thinking that we obtain information from them by supposing these beings to be flesh and blood creatures like ourselves, or by confusing them with Jinn that appear in the guise of aliens. According to the holographic principle, an object in our universe, which we think is made up of parts, possesses information belonging both to itself and to all the objects it has been in relation with. Thus, touching that object, or coming into contact with it in some way, means at the same time coming into communication with all the information it possesses. Because, from an outside perspective, in this communication the consciousness belonging to both becomes a single state of consciousness, and it becomes meaningless to look for this consciousness somewhere between the two. Thus, if this object is a historical artifact, it makes it possible to see, in the form of a feeling or a vision, all the information belonging to the period it belongs to. If we evaluate the same concept from an inside-out point of view, coming into relation with an object and extracting the information belonging to it means that all the processes that form that object are brought out from the hidden order of the brain, which is the hologram plate, into its explicit order and are perceived in the form of feeling, sound, vision. This situation holds true both for these two sides and universally.
Okay, I can understand. Has a scientist said anything about this?
On this subject, the famous physicist Prof. David Bohm says the following: "To understand something mentally is in fact to grasp it. What we call grasping is becoming aware that we are one with that thing. When food is taken in, it becomes part of the living organism. In the same way, when we take something else into ourselves, it too becomes part of the living consciousness, circulates and becomes part of that consciousness. Just as the environment is part of the tree, the living tree is also part of the entire environment. If we generalize this a little, a structure that appears larger than a unit, this can be at the same dimension or even smaller, shapes a unit at a subdimension, while the structure that is the reason for that unit's existence is in fact also brought into being by that unit itself. The reason for this is that all the properties belonging to that larger structure are also found within that unit. This point of view shows that by removing the distinction between the living and the non-living in the universe, everything is alive and conscious. Just as in the form we perceive with our five senses, the stone structure at Islam's pilgrimage center is not an ordinary object as mystics describe it, but is a place that fully reflects universal consciousness and energy, and that by units turning toward it without worship, that is, without directing a special orientation toward any particular direction, they can bring forth to the extent of their own capacity these qualities and properties within their own essence. Accordingly, if a human being, a community, or a nation harms someone or does good to someone, in short, whatever kind of action they engage in, they in fact do this to themselves. The action they put forth finds its response within space-time, in that unit, community, or nation, not necessarily in the same form, but in a different way, through a discharge of this energy in the form of disaster, calamity, war, and the like. This concept appears in mystic sources in the form, whoever saves a person is as if they have saved all of humanity. Whoever kills a person is as if they have killed all of humanity.
Likewise, according to the universal system described by the name religion, we can see that the reactions given in response to an action taken, reactions that we perceive as harsh or violent, are actually meant to prevent that negative action holographically from spreading out in the form of an energy exchange that is its reflection in our dimension, again within that society or those units.
Really? Can everyone do this then?
Actually, here's the thing. Events of this kind, just as with other phenomena, are among the characteristics of a unit's consciousness, one that possesses universal consciousness. They are not something that ordinary people or objects could bring forth. If it were so, then a situation of this kind would, in this sense, lead to metaphysical fallacies. Whether it is the phenomenon called psychoarchaeology, or the obtaining of information about the past through a medium or a seer, it makes no difference. As we have stated in our previous writings, these occurrences arise from the effects of radiational beings on the brain. The reason why information about the past in these phenomena, for example, information about civilizations like Mu, Atlantis, or other historical events, is clearer and more definite compared to information about the future, is that the Jinn have a lifespan of 600, 700, even 1,000 years, and that they read the Akashic records.
Is there an academic study on this subject?
Yes, there is. Now, let's look at the academic level studies that have been done on this subject. On February 14, 1935, the famous Polish medium Stefan Ossowiecki, upon touching a fragment belonging to the fossilized foot of a human being while gazing into empty space, found that the room he was in suddenly grew dim and became transparent. During this, his own body also disappeared, and he found himself inside a scene belonging to a very ancient time. As he watched this three-dimensional scene, he was able to go wherever he wished within it and watch whatever image he desired, to the point that his eyes even moved as if the things he saw and described had a material structure. He saw all the truths related to the man he had touched, and in the end, the images faded and it returned to its former state. This person was so talented in this phenomenon called psychometry that Professor Stanislaw Poniatowski, the best ethnologist of Poland's era at the time, took an interest in this medium and carried out a series of experiments on Stefan using various tools made of quartz and stone that he had collected from different parts of the world. It could only be understood that these stones, called lithic, had been shaped by human hand by someone trained in this subject. Although the professor knew which date and period these stones belonged to, Stefan had no knowledge of this at all, nor could he possibly have had any. Each time, Stefan correctly identified one by one the age of these objects, the culture they belonged to, and the geographic location where they were found. Although he gave some contradictory information at times, it was later seen that this stemmed from the professor's own notes. The experiments were not limited to this either. When he took in his hand a stone belonging to the Paleolithic period in France, dating from between 15,000 and 10,000 BC, he said that the women of that period had a very complex style of hair braiding. Although this information was not accepted at first, it was later understood to be correct from statues that were subsequently found. In a similar way, what he said was confirmed by research carried out hundreds of times over. In one of these instances, describing even the size and shape of Stone Age people, he said that they used oil lamps. This information was later confirmed by excavations carried out in the Dordogne region of France.
Is there another example?
Yes, there is. Apart from this, Norman Emerson, a founding member of the Canadian Archaeological Association and professor of anthropology at the University of Toronto, in experiments he conducted with George McMullen, a truck driver, observed that after moving around for a while at an archaeological site, McMullen would describe the culture and way of life of people belonging to that ancient period. In one of these instances, he said he was standing on top of an Iroquois longhouse, and in the excavations that followed, this ancient structure emerged exactly as he had described it. In fact, at a 1973 conference of Canada's leading archaeologists, Emerson explained his findings by saying, "I believe that I obtained this information I have conveyed about archaeological facts and settlements from a psychic person, for whom there is no evidence that it was obtained through conscious reasoning." W.C.H. Teneff, head of the Parapsychology Institute at Utrecht State University, together with Marius Volkov, dean of Witwatersrand University in South Africa, determined in a series of experiments they conducted in the 1960s with the famous Dutch clairvoyant Gerard Croiset that Croiset made correct descriptions about the past regarding a small bone fragment he held in his hand.
In addition, Dr. Lawrence Lashan, a clinical psychologist in New York, also conducted similar experiments with the famous American psychic Eileen Garrett and obtained interesting results. At a meeting of the American Anthropological Association in 1961, archaeologist Clarence W. Wyant announced that the discovery of trace sepoites, considered one of the world's most important archaeological finds in Central America, had been made with the help of a psychically gifted person.
So why is it so hard to accept this?
Yes, it really is a hard thing. Understanding the holographic operating mechanism of the system seems quite difficult to us, even impossible. That is why, instead of trying to understand it, it is also easy for us to take refuge in the easy way out of denial, closing our consciousness to universal truths and continuing to think without objection in a manner suited to the habits of our five senses. We see the example that best explains this situation in science itself, namely in the theory of relativity. As is known, while the rules of the world we perceive at low speeds remain valid, at high speeds, this reality gives way to another reality. This situation, which means that time, dimensions, and mass change, is, however imaginary, fantastic, virtual, or dreamlike it may seem to us, just as real. It makes no difference whether we believe it or not, because in the system there is no room for believing or not believing. There is only a mechanism that exists and functions, and the gears of that mechanism.